Shalom, Israel. In this little expose about Thanksgiving, I'd like to start off with the wisdom of Solomon. Thus in process of time an ungodly custom grown strong was kept as a law, and graven images were worshipped by the commandments of kings. We think of Thanksgiving as a holiday of family gathering, good food, and giving thanks to God for all of our blessings. We have all heard the story of the Pilgrims and the Native Americans coming together to enjoy a feast in our wonderful country. This video is made to expose the lies that have been forced upon us. In Genesis 28:14, Jacob is having a dream, and during this dream it says, "And thy seed shall be as the dust of the earth, and thou shalt spread abroad to the west and to the east, and to the north and to the south. And in thee and in thy seed shall all the families of the earth be blessed." The children of Israel originally lived in the east, so when the scripture indicates that they would spread abroad to the west, they would find their way to a new land. From 2nd Esdras, we read about the 10 tribes. It said, "Those are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoners out of their own land in the time of Hosea the king, whom Salmanasar, the king of Assyria, led away captive. And he carried them over the waters, and so came they into another land. But they took this counsel among themselves, that they would leave the multitude of the heathen, and go forth into a further country, where never mankind dwelt, that they might there keep their statutes, which they never kept in their own land. And they entered into Euphrates by the narrow passages of the river. For the Most High then showed signs for them, and held still the flood, till they were passed over. For through that country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half, and the same region is called Arsareth." And we've talked about Arsareth before. This was what we today know as America. So these tribes that would venture into Arsareth would be the tribes of Reuben, Asher, Ephraim, Issachar, Simeon, Naphtali, Manasseh, Zebulun, Dan, and Gad. These were the names that the Most High would know these descendants of Jacob by. The children of Gad, who are today who we call the Native Americans, they are Israelites. Some of the ways that we can tell that they were Israelites, we read in Numbers 15, verses 37 through 39, God says, "And the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and bid them that they make fringes in the borders of their garment throughout their generations, and that they put upon the borders of a ribbon of blue. And it shall be unto you for a fringe, that ye may look upon it, and remember all the commandments of the Lord, and do them, that ye seek not after your own heart and your own eyes, after which ye used to go a-whoring, that ye may remember and do all my commandments, and be holy unto your God. I am the Lord your God, which brought you out of the land of Egypt, to be your God. I am the Lord your God." Talked about fringes. The Native Americans wore fringes. In Deuteronomy 6, verses 6 through 8, it says, "And these words which I command thee this day shall be in thy heart, and thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. And thou shalt bind them for a sign upon thine hand, and they shall be as frontlets between their eyes. And thou shalt write upon them the post of thy house and on thy gates. Saying that they had to wear them on their foreheads. The natives wore headbands. The teepees that the natives lived in were actually a type of sukkah that was mentioned in the Feast of Tabernacles by Moses. In Genesis 49:19, it says, Gad, a troop shall overcome him, but he shall overcome at the last. The troop that would overcome them would be the colonial armies led by Andrew Jackson. So let us track the so-called discovery of the New World. In 1608, the Pilgrims would leave England for Holland because they dreaded having to serve a state-authorized church that all citizens had to worship. They landed in Holland and got their religious freedom, but they were not satisfied. In 1614, the Pilgrims set off for the New World led by Captain John Smith. Befriending Pocahontas in the Virginia colony, Captain Smith would kidnap some of the natives and sell them into slavery. In 1620, the settlers that were in Holland would attempt to go back to the Virginia colony, but because of the storms and probably God's hand, they would land in the area today known as Cape Cod. There they would be observed by the indigenous people there, the Wampanoag Indians. Days upon days, the settlers dug for gold instead of planting crops. Eventually, their food supply would be depleted. The Pilgrims would begin to dig up the corpses of the natives, which had been buried with wheat and corn. After eating up the foodstuffs, the settlers would then begin to eat the corpses. That is when the sons of Gad took pity on the Pilgrims. They befriended the settlers, taught them to survive in the cold, harsh New England winter, taught them how to fish, how to plant crops, how to live in this new habitation. The Pilgrims were thankful for the natives' intervention and made the first of many treaties with them. This would be one of the 300 treaties that they would make with the natives, which were all broken. As is written in Psalms 55:20 and 21, it says, He hath put forth his hands against such as be at peace with him. He hath broken his commandment. The words of his mouth were smoother than butter, but war was in his heart. His words were softer than oil, yet were they drawn swords. So despite the sons of Gad's hospitality, the settlers would covet the lands that they now dwell on. In a book by Glenn Ford, The American Thanksgiving, Rejoicing, Genocide, and White Supremacy, he wrote, in 1622, an English slave trader, Captain Hunt, would capture Indians, take them to Europe, and sell them into slavery for 220 shillings apiece. He also wrote, the Thanksgiving story is an absolution of the Pilgrims, whose brutal quest for absolute power in the New World is made to seem both religiously motivated and eminently human. Most importantly, the Pilgrims are depicted as victims of harsh weather and their own naive yet wholesome visions of a new beginning. So, the Pilgrims sent word back to England, and soon many would come across to this new land, bringing with them their own covetous ways and diseases. The Pilgrims gave the natives smallpox blankets, which wiped out 70% of their population, as they had no immunity against this new disease. Did you know that along with the so-called Negroes, that the so-called Indians were amongst the first commodities traded on Wall Street? As a matter of fact, the area that Wall Street sits on was a result of an Indian massacre by the Dutch. So in 1637, while the Pequot tribe was celebrating their end of harvest season feast, the Green Corn Festival, in the area known as Groton, Connecticut, 700 men, women, and children were killed by the settlers. Settlers called out to the Pequot to come out of their teepees, and the men would come out and be clubbed to death or shot. The women and children who stayed inside the teepees were burned alive. After this atrocity, the governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, John Winthrop, declared a day of thanksgiving for God allowing them to destroy their enemies. This, however, still wasn't enough. The settlers would go from village to village, wiping out entire villages and announcing Thanksgiving after each and every one. Bounties were established, 20 shillings for the Indian scalps and 40 shillings for slaves. Said the pilgrims in these slaughters would cut off Indian women's breasts and play baseball, and cut off the men's head and play soccer with them. It would be years later that George Washington would declare that there be only one Thanksgiving per year. Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Andrew Jackson all endorsed the extermination of the native population, a telling sign upon the founders of this country. Later, Abraham Lincoln legislated Thanksgiving to be a national celebrated holiday during the Civil War, on the same day that he'd ordered troops to march on an already starving Sioux Nation in Minnesota. Today, the remnant of the indigenous people celebrate Thanksgiving as a national day of mourning. It is interesting to note that Hitler took his cue for the extermination of the so-called Jews, that's a story for another day, from the colonists' actions in America. The hated concentration camps are likened to the reservations on which the natives have had to live. So why did the children of Gad suffer so greatly? For the same reason that the so-called blacks and the so-called Hispanics would suffer. Scripture foretold of these events straight from the words of Moses. For in Deuteronomy 7:6 it said, "For thou art a holy people unto the Lord thy God. The Lord thy God hath chosen thee to be a special people unto himself, above all people that are upon the face of the earth." We read in Ecclesiastes 10, verse 7, "I have seen servants upon horses, and princes walking as servants upon the earth." Now, the word Israel means Prince of God. The princes were now servants. Why had the holy people under God been stricken this way? Because of disobedience. The disobedience that had been written about in Deuteronomy 28. In Deuteronomy 28, in verse 1 it starts off, "And it shall come to pass, if thou shalt hearken diligently unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe and to do all his commandments which I commanded thee this day, that the Lord thy God will set thee on high above all the nations of the earth. But it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes, which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee." Verse 18, cursed shall be the fruit of thy body, and the fruit of thy land, the increase of thy kind, and the flocks of thy sheep. In 21, the Lord shall make the pestilence cleave unto thee, until he have consumed thee from off the land, whither thou goest to possess it. The Lord shall smite thee with a consumption, and with a fever, and with an inflammation, and with extreme burning, and with the sword, and with blasting, and with mildew, and they shall pursue thee until thou perish. 25 and 26. The Lord shall cause thee to be smitten before thine enemies. Thou shalt go out one way against them, and flee 7 ways before them, and shalt be removed into all the kingdoms of the earth. And thy carcass shall be meat unto all fowls of the air, and unto the beasts of the earth, and no man shall fray them away. 28. The Lord shall smite thee with madness, and blindness, and astonishment of heart. 30 to 33. Thou shalt betroth a wife, and another man shall lie with her. Thou shalt build a house, and thou shalt not dwell therein. Thou shalt plant a vineyard, and shalt not gather the grapes thereof. Thine ox shall be slain before thine eyes, and thou shalt not eat thereof. Thine ass shall be violently taken away from before thy face, and shall not be restored to thee. Thy sheep shall be given unto thine enemies, and thou shalt have none to rescue them. Thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people, and thine eyes shall look, and fail with longing for them all the day long, and there shall be no might in thine hand. The fruit of thy land and all thy labors shall a nation which thou knowest not eat up, and thou shalt be only oppressed and crushed alway. 36 and 37. The Lord shall bring thee and thy king, which thou shalt set over thee, unto a nation which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, and there shalt thou serve other gods, wood and stone. And thou shalt become an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword among all nations whither the Lord shall lead thee. 38. Thou shalt carry much seed out into the field, and shalt gather but little in, for the locust shall consume it. Thou shalt plant vineyards, and dress them, but shalt neither drink of the wine, nor gather the grapes, for the worm shall eat them. Thou shalt have olive trees throughout all thy coasts, but thou shalt not anoint thyself with the oil, for thine oil shall cast its fruit. Thou shalt beget sons and daughters, but thou shalt not enjoy them, for they will go into captivity. 43. The stranger that is within thee shall get up above thee very high, and thou shalt come down very low. 45. Moreover, all these curses shall come upon thee, and shall pursue thee, and overtake thee, till thou be destroyed. Because thou hearken not unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to keep his commandments and his statutes, which he commanded thee. 48:52. Therefore shalt thou serve thine enemies, which the Lord shall send against thee, in hunger, and in thirst, and in nakedness, and in want of all things. And he shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck, until he have destroyed thee. The Lord shall bring a nation against thee from far, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand, a nation of fierce countenance, which shall not regard the person of the old, nor show favor to the young. And he shall eat the fruit of thy cattle, and the fruit of thy land, until thou be destroyed, which also shall not leave thee either corn, wine, or oil, or the increase of thy kind, or flocks of thy sheep, until he have destroyed thee. And he shall besiege thee in all thy gates, until thy high and fenced walls come down, wherein thou trustest, throughout all thy land. And he shall besiege thee in all thy gates throughout all thy land, which the Lord thy God hath given thee. And finally in 64 to 68, and the Lord shall scatter thee among all people, from the one end of the earth even unto the other. And there thou shalt serve other gods, which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone. And among these nations shalt thou find no ease, neither shall the sole of thy foot have rest. But the Lord shall give thee there a trembling heart, and failing eyes, and sorrow of mind. And thy life shall hang in doubt before thee, and thou shalt fear day and night, and shalt have none assurance of thy life. In the morning thou shalt say, would God it were even. And at even thou shalt say, would God it were morning. For the fear of thine heart wherewith thou shalt fear, and for the sight of thine eyes which thou shalt see. And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again. And there ye shall be sold unto your enemies, for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. And when the last reference is to Egypt, excuse me, that we have to remember that that is a Greek word, and it means bondage or slavery. So the Lord says he will bring you again into Egypt, into captivity, into bondage, into slavery again. So these curses have befallen the children of Israel, the children of Gad, the children of Benjamin, the children of Ephraim, and the children of Judah. All prophesied by Moses, who was inspired by the Most High. So today, we have been taught that Thanksgiving is a righteous holiday, when we should pray and thank the Most High for our blessings. It's all a lie, a deceit from men. The Most High has sanctioned holy days for us, not these man-made doctrines that celebrate genocide and murder. Matthew 15:3 says, Christ asked, why do ye also transgress the commandment of God by your tradition? In Isaiah 1, verses 14 and 15, it says, your new moons and your appointed feasts my soul hateth. They are trouble unto me. I am weary to bear them. And when ye spread forth your hands, I will hide mine eyes from you. Yea, when ye make many prayers, I will not hear you. Your hands are full of blood. In Amos 5 and 21, it says, I despise your feast days, and I will not smell in your solemn assemblies. Though ye offer me burnt offerings and your meat offerings, I will not accept them. Neither will I regard the peace offerings of your fat beast. Take thou away from me the noise of thy songs, for I will not hear the melody of thy balls. So think strongly, Israel, before you celebrate this day of mourning. Let us trust in the word of God, return unto his commandments, statutes, and his laws, so that he can restore us to our former glory. Shalom, Israel.